Hey guys, what's going on? So I'm just starting an impromptu stream today because I want to get started on this new series, which is called Painting Up the Monster Manual, where I intend to basically work my way through the 5e original monster manual, painting up each monster one at a time. So it's quite a task to take on because I've not counted it, but there's quite a few different beasts, monsters, all in this book. And as we go through, obviously, it's a case that I'm going to try and get a mini for each one and then get it primed, get it ready for streaming, and then get it painted. Obviously, if we were just doing one of our normal painting hangouts, it would be like a 2-hour stream and stuff, but I wanted this to be a bit of a shorter show, and I wanted it to be not necessarily one about being the perfect minis. I want them to be tabletop ready. So I'm going to try and speed paint my way through each individual one. So this week, the first mini will be the Aarakocra. This is page 12 in the monster manual, and it is the first monster that we come across. So what is an Aarakocra? Well, I can read this to you here, but essentially it is a bird person. They are from the elemental plane of air, and it is their job, I believe, to protect it in certain ways. You can have them as a monster, or you can have them as a player race. We can see them as player races in shows like High Rollers, where Keelek Ad Kalar is played by Tom Hazel, who plays a burb. He is the Aarakocra in that game. We also saw Travis Willingham of Critical Role play throught, I believe it was, in Calamity, run by Brennan from Dimension 20. So you can have them as monsters, you can have them as player racers. I think it came out in Elemental Evil, I think it was that they were in. But yeah, I'm going to get straight to it and be speed painting them up. This mini is the Knowles' WizKids Aarakocra. And I think it came with a harpy, so when I get to the harpy, I'll be doing that one there. It comes with a little flight stand just there, and I will actually switch to the PTZ so you guys can see that. And turn the volume down. So, PTZ, there you go. So, we have the little flight stand there, which I actually took mine off so I could prime it without that air bit, and also the mini itself. So it's quite a small mini. Obviously, it's a medium-sized creature. If we were looking at it in terms of stats of the monster manual, I'll give them to you here. We have. So it is an armor class 12 and 13 hit points, and it is a CR 1/4. So it's quite a low-level monster if you were to have it on the table as either an NPC or as an enemy. But as a player character, obviously with class abilities, we then go up from there. So I'm going to try and paint this up, and I'm going to try and get it to as close to the monster manual as I can. So let's do it that way around, because that's the best way to see it. Obviously, we've got those browns to whites on the wings, and then we've got the a bit of yellow on the beak, and we've got that green sort of tabard. So that's what we're going to go with. And I'm going to start with the browns. And because this is going to be a speed painting show, I'm going to start basically with dry brushing and work my way through dry brushing. So there's not going to be much in the way of thinning paint, it's not going to be much in the way of layering. It is going to be quite a slapdash job to get this table ready in no time at all. So we're starting with the Army Painter Bear Brown from the GM starter set, but that is also the Oak Brown from their regular set. I'm doing quite a heavy dry brush here, and we're going to go pretty slapdash all over the whole mini, because the great thing about the colour palette that it is, with the browns and the greens and the yellows, they're all going to sit on top of that lovely. So, I primed this in black. I used the TT Combat black primer, which has got this really lovely matte finish to it, just kind of like the Army Painter Chaos Black one. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I actually can't tell the difference between those two primers. And I hear rumours that they are made in the same place. So, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's the rumour I've heard. Feel free, TT Combat or Army Painter, to correct me. But right now, I am stippling on a load of brown, and that is going. I'm trying to get that into every nook and cranny. Well, I say every nook and cranny. The black's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting here as well. But the brown's going to be there to start lifting out those layers. And we're going heavier so that if it does go into those nooks and crannies, it's fine. But it's not going to take me long dry brushing this to get through it. And I'll try and show you each step along the way and try and get a decent camera angle on it so that you can see what I'm doing as I go between. The nice thing as well is between each layer, I can go between this and the base plate. Because obviously, nozzles all come on their own little like terrain bits. So let's go to that camera. So they all come on one of these. This one's obviously a flight one, but usually like you find like both of the feet are attached to a bit of rock or a bit of something just to kind of like support those legs or support the bottom of the monster and give you, well, I imagine there's more immersion. But like I said, I've taken mine off so I can really get into the bottom of this and not get that clear bit on there. So that is the brown pretty much all over it. So this is the oak brown. That's from the Army Painter, which is Bear Brown as well, from their GM starter set. So if I put that one there and get some light on that, you should see that we have my hand. I'm just going to try and get it to stand up. There you go. There you go. That is the base layer. Primed black, stippled and dry brushed with the oak brown there. So while that one is drying off on there, I'm going to cover the floor now, and I'm quite literally, that's got the Army Painter grey brush on primer on there, and I'm going to take some contrast black. This is the Black Templar from Citadel. It's probably one of my favourite paints, and this is pretty much what I do most of my detailing with. I'm just going to clean off that brush ready for the next dry brushing. It's lovely and warm in here today, so the brushes won't take too long to go. Right, I need a heavy layer brush. So, take some of that and move it away so I don't knock it over. And I'm quite literally just going to lag that on there. And what I intend to do is dry brush up through the greys once this is on. So, hopefully a bit of that grey should show through from the top once the contrast dries. And I'm being quite heavy with the contrast. And the only reason I didn't prime this black was because I didn't want to get it on that clear bit. I didn't want it to end up, you know, just seeping up there. I didn't want you to see too much of the paint when it goes to hitting the table. Because one thing being table ready, but for me, I still want it to be relatively neat. So you can clean that brush off, and then hopefully you'll see they are the two base layers down. So, black around, black contrast on top of the primer grey, and then we've got brown on top of the primer black. And now we're going to move to the next brown. So the next brown is the Dryad Brown, which is the brown leather from the Army Painter. So give that a bit of a shake. And again, we're not going to thin this down. We're just going to go straight in with a little bit, and we're going to go into the dry brushing. I need a separate dry brush, just while that one dries. Let's go with, you think I'd have had this prepped beforehand. Let's go with you. So, here we go. Quite a soft one there, so that's good. We're going to take a little dab of that, and this time we're going to take a bit more off there, because we don't want it to be as heavy as the original one. And we also only really want to get the feathers here, which should mean that they start to stand out a bit more. It doesn't matter if some areas go a bit heavier or not, because we've got that mottled effect on the feathers. But we do want to give it that depth by leaving some of those darker browns and those blacks in the recess. Obviously on this miniature, we can see that the spear that it's carrying is quite bent, but that's unfortunately a common trait with the WizKids Mini. When they're £4 for a pack of 2, I'm not complaining, because we've got minis for the table. But having minis for the table is great, but not all of the minis from the Monster Manual are out yet. Which is a shame for this series in particular, and for some DMs who want minis. So I am going to have to do this series not just with the WizKids minis, but with some 3D printed minis that I'll hopefully get from Warrior Prints or do myself, depending on the size and or the quality that I want for them. But either way, my intention, whether through mostly nozzles or through 3D printing, is to be able to paint up the entire monster manual for you. So, that is a lot lighter of a dry brush. I'm going to try and get the tops of the wings just a little bit more, so I can really layer those up later with those lighter browns and towards the whites. And the top of the head as well, and maybe the very tips of the tail feathers. Right, so I'm going to put that one on there. How's the contrast doing? Let's have a look, but I'll also show you where we're at. So, don't know if you'll see much of a difference there already, but we have a little bit of a difference going on, and we're just going to slowly build up those layers in the dry brushing so that we can just give it that depth before we add any kind of detail in. The contrast is still drying, so I will leave that one there, and then I will go back to the mini. So at this point, let us get the next brown on the table. So we've used the bear brown, the oak brown, the dryad brown, which is the leather brown. Now, I'm going to hit this up with some Zandari dust from Citadel. Slightly outside of what we call like the colour triad, but hopefully it should give us that contrast, that difference as we start leaning towards those light browns. And I'm going to really take a lot of that off here, off the brush. I'm going to start hitting anywhere that light would pretty much hit. I want to get those kneecaps, I want to get the top of the head, tops of the wings, those tips of those tail feathers, the edges of the wings. So that is the majority of the place where we're going to see light hitting the model in detail, really. So, just grab a little bit more just to go around those top bits again. And then we're going to try and just blend that in slightly so that the tops are really, really kind of showing out. Showing it up. We want that head to be a lot lighter as well. And there is some really good details on these minis, and this is something that I've spoken about on Band of Badgers, and I've spoken about with other miniature painters on stream, is that for cheap minis, the Knowles' minis do have a relatively good amount of detail on there. However, they get lost in the primer, and I do strip all of my minis down that I get from WizKids so that I can prime them. Right, so we've got 3 layers of paint on now. Let's have a look at that. So you should be able to start seeing the top of those wings there are starting to really show up. The kneecaps, the things like the claws, all of those browns, now they're starting to layer, are going to really kind of start showing up. And I'll try and get, at the end of this video, some close-up pictures for you. But now I can start adding in some more details. So, for this next bit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some... Let's do some of the green or the yellow. So, I'll probably take... Let's do the yellow because I've got it right here. We're going to start working on the beak and the eyes. So, let us... I've got some moon dust here, which is another army painter yellow. It's quite a pale yellow, and I'm going to be using that, and then I'm probably going to use a contrast paint after it. I am going to thin this down, and I don't really need all that much. Just need a nice smooth consistency. So, I'm going to start with my shaky hands. We're just going to apply that to the tip of the beak and start pushing it backwards, and then pulling bits forwards. That way we'll hopefully get a nice sort of blend between certain areas. there is this like really fine line, and I'm just using the very edge of the brush just to get that where the beak is around the edge of the mouth. Right, there is a tiny, tiny, tiny little eye, and we're just gonna try and fill that in quickly but as gently. And the technique I like to employ here is to basically make the movement of the brushstroke before we get to the mini. And it's all about like just trying to be as steady as possible. And then when you finally get to it, you should be able to control your brush a bit more. And I find that like I used to avoid doing eyes where possible. But now that I do things like this, I tend to actually find that now I need to do the eyes, and it adds that immersion in, even when we're only doing something as tabletop ready. So we're going to see if there's any more yellow on there. I think that is that, and I will put that on the camera there for you. Let's have a quick look. So you should start seeing that beak popping out with a different colour. Got those browns in there. But we're going to be working our way through some more. But it's only been a couple of minutes and we're, you know, steaming ahead really. So now we want those greens, and I'm going to grab a darker green to begin with. So I'm out of the angel green from the army painter, so I'm going to use the Caliban green, which is for you Dark Angels players and 40k out there, your standard base for those. I am going to have to thin this one down because we have, well, it's quite a thick base paint really, to be honest, and I want those details to show through. I'm trying to use contrast as little as possible because I'm not that good with them. So I would love to show off speed paints or contrast, but compared to people like Dragon School Studios and people like Kelly Rowe out on Instagram, I'm not there with the speed paints and the contrast. I'm just not that good. However, speed painting through stuff like this, there are many, many D&D sessions I've run where I've needed to get a mini ready pretty sharpish. So I'm going to try and steady my hand because I'm shaking quite a bit today. And we're just going to go in there and get that tabard and that armour. So let's go in there. I think for me, Aarakocras are probably one of my favourite player racers slash monsters because one, the ability to fly is incredible. I quite like the high rollers effect where they do them like the Rito from Legend of Zelda. I like that the wings have the hands at the end of them, and I like that Keelek does that. I'm not quite sure if Seret from Critical Role had that particular effect, or if it was the wings and then had the arms separately. I know different people feel differently about them, but I like the arms to be attached to the wings. I just think it's kind of cool. But that is the majority of the green on. Oh, no, need to get under that bit there. So underneath that spear, there is actually a bit of detail that we do need to get. All of that tabard, that clothing, we need to get in there and do that. So there is, however, a belt which we'll go back in with the... I'll probably do some XV88. It's kind of like a really colourful brown because I really want that to pop off and look, well, a bit more vibrant. So we have that one to there. The contrast paint is still drying on the base. So let's show you where we're at so far with the colours. So we're starting to see those greens popping through, the yellows, and we also have a bit of the green on the back there. Just trying to get anywhere with those base layers that we can, we'll get it ready. So let's move on to what is next. Actually, he has a blue belt. So it's kind of like a teal colour. So let's grab a turquoise maybe. I'm going to grab Hydra Turquoise. It's probably one of my favourite colours from the Army Painter. And we are going to add that one in a minute. And I might add that to the detailing around his tabard and his armour. And then I'll do leather on... Oh no, it's green on the pauldrons as well, actually. So let's get those on there. And then we'll go around the edges with the teal. or the turquoise even. So let's add in that green. Right, so cool, right, that's on the shoulder pauldrons. Not that there are any pauldrons anywhere else. Right, so let's have a look at what we're going to do next. Right, that contrast is about dry, so we're going to start going through the greys. So with the Aarakocra, as they stand in the monster manual, they have a few different abilities. Obviously, they're only CR 1/4, so it's quite, low-level fighting if you're going against one. But they do have a dive attack, which is pretty good. So, flying monsters can be a pain in the ass for low-level characters. And it's a great way as a DM to add a bit of challenge to an encounter. But when you've got things like a dive attack, so if the Aarakocra is flying and dives at least 30 feet straight towards the target and then hits it with a melee weapon attack, the attack deals an extra 1d6 damage to the target. That extra chip damage, that extra little bit, really can add some urgency to your players and to their encounter. So I really like that, and it just gives them that little bit more, and it gives the players the urgency to not let it get too high, to maybe get the ranged combat guys involved to stop it from coming down. Maybe your bards or your wizards to learn or cast hold person. So I'm going to grab some of this Mechanicus standard with our dry brush. And I do want this to be somewhat heavy. Not as heavy as we did with the brown, because we want that contrast black to really do its job. But we're just going to try and dry brush. And I'm coming in from the edges on the stonework here, just to basically not hit that clear area of plastic that we want as it's a mini that's designed to be looking like it's in flight. As soon as we hit that plastic and we cover that in paint, it's going to end up, well, just looking like it's on a painted stand. So once we've hit that up, we're going to hit it with an ash grey or a light grey. We don't need much, because this is just going to be the highlighting effect. So let's grab our other dry brush and let's grab some of that. And this is a lot lighter. This is really going to pick out the edges and the top. So I'm going to come in from the top but around the edges to give it that definition for once we stick this to the base plate. And then very lightly, just going to hit those top edges with the dry brush. And we have some stonework. So let's see if we can show you that one up close. It is quite literally just dry brushing on that one. And I like to do those little bases if I'm using them, because if you leave them grey, it takes away from the immersion, and that's obviously not the point of any tabletop game, especially Dungeons and Dragons. We want to be immersed in the story. And if we're throwing minis down on the table, it's awesome when the DM throws down painted minis and you can really kind of see what you're fighting. You can add a sense of urgency, it can add a sense of storytelling, because you can tell a story during combat, both visually with minis and verbally with our narratives. So let's have a look at that turquoise then. So we're going to add a little bit of that to our palette. I will thin that down somewhat with our pure paint just there. I just take a little bit of that water and I just put it next to it on the palette and then just work my way towards it. So we have this belt, right. I've got to keep this steady because it's not on its base. I have made it a bit harder for myself when it comes to painting. But that's okay, because I'm quite used to it. Otherwise, I would have it in one of these, like a little miniature holder, or I would put a spike into the bottom of it and hold it on a cork or something. But not today. Right, so we've got the front side. Now we need to get the back side on that belt. Right, so we've got that bit there. I'm going to try and go in and get the edges of those armor bits. I'm going to use the side of the brush, which I've already now messed up. I'm just going to wash that bit away, thin it down. Probably take a bit of a thicker bit of paint here. Take some off the brush, and then we're going to try and just get that top triangle. Because that's where the detail is on the armor. We have this definitive breastplate and its definitive collar line. And although the dark green is sitting in there quite nicely, it's really good to add just that little bit of pop, that little bit of colour to tie into the belt and to really make it show up. So we've got that bit there. We'll do a little bit on the tabard at the bottom. And you don't need to do the whole line, you can just do like certain edges or certain points. Just enough to pick out that detail, to give the players something to eye up. I think if it was a more defined detail or something that was important to the story, then yes, I would probably add more to it. But we don't need to. We are just making this table ready. So, let's see what we've got there. I'm going to add it just into the backs of the shoulders as well, so that if we're viewing it from behind, we can see it on those pauldrons. And it just gives us a few different lines to look at. Okay, so let's show you where we're at so far. We have one Aarakocra coming together. We've got the green on there, we've got some turquoise, we've got the slight definition in the wings. I'll try and get a better shot for that soon. So at this point, I am now going to attach it to the base. We have standard WizKids base just there, one of the medium bases. And then we're going to take some of our super glue, apply a dab to that. Which foot is it? I'm going to take some of that glue. I'm going to put it on the bottom of the foot for now, and I should have a moment where I don't need to wait for that to dry, because I'm going to apply some super glue accelerator to this bit. That's going to get plonked straight on there, and then I'm going to try and do the same thing all again. And because we've got that super glue accelerator on there, we should be able to get it straight on. There we go. So, we now have it attached to the base, which means we can now go in and add all of the details in while using the miniature holder, which is going to mean shaky hands like mine, and anything that's a bit more finesse is going to be a bit easier to do. But yeah, so we're on there, and that is the start of the very last bit that we need to do. So, we have... Let's see where we're going to work on here. Let's go with some... Let's do those leathers. Let's get those done. So, he's got like these leather bands going down their arm. I would... Oh no, they are quite green on there. So, let's stick to that. But I'm going to do them a slightly different green. Let's do them army green. That's scaly hide. You think I'd have had this prepped? Where are you? There you go. Right, so we've got an army green from the Army Painter. This is, it's a bit lighter, it's a bit more mute, a bit more satin, I'd say, a bit matted. But it's a very easy one to get on with. I hoped that I would have a smaller dry brush on me today, but I don't. So we're going to apply this one using a layer brush. So I'm going to take some of that. I'm going to take a lot of that off. I'm going to try and work my way down, almost dry brushing over those browns where the straps are. I need to be careful not to get it on the hands. Because I want those hands to remain in the browns. I want them to remain claw-like. And this just almost like shading really with a dry brush. We are just trying to add those little differences in colour. And now we're on the leg wraps. And again, I don't want to hit that clear plastic. We want to leave that well alone. Cool. So I think that will just about do on there. Anywhere else? I might just hit the top of those pauldrons where the light would be hitting with some of that army green as well. Just add a little bit of colour into that. So, let's have a look. I'm going to do the same thing again, just on the arm. I'm just going to add a few areas of light. And this is just, I'm not really thinning it down too much, but I'm just adding where the light would be hitting onto the armour. Just adding a little bit of direction, a little bit of colour. And there's a tiny bit on the back there. I'm never too bothered about the back. Right, so where are we to next? Let's have a look at the staff. I'm going to add some... Yeah, okay, I'm going to do the wood in XV88 because it's quite a pale picture. So I'm going to actually just do this in a brighter brown, this kind of like tan colour. Thinning it down ever so slightly. And then I'm going to get the main bit of the staff, the wood, with this XV88. And then there's a wrap up here, which I'm going to get with a different brown. And then work my way probably to like a cream or a white maybe. And then we're going to get the staff tip. Yep. That's all there is for that bit. Let's work on the tip. Oh, yeah. So we're going to take some lead belcher. Let's start there. Once more, just going to thin it down ever so slightly because we want it to be smooth but not running all over the place. Take some of that off the brush. And that is the tip. So it's a javelin, not a spear, my apologies. So according to the stat block, the javelin attack is melee or ranged, which is a +4 to hit. It's a reach of 5 foot. So I would have thought it had a 10-foot reach, but I guess not. Or if you throw it, it's 30 foot throw distance or 120 foot at disadvantage. And it deals 1d6 plus 2 piercing damage. Yeah. So that's the spear attack, or the javelin. Right. Now that I'm waiting for those bits to dry, I will probably go in and start working up the whites on the wings. And maybe add a few more details like those. We've got some stripes on there, so I might try and do that. Let's try and have a look at where we are. So, we currently have an Aarakocra looking like this. Which, all well and good for now. But we're going to go in, just go a little bit further. Because we can. So, looking at the time, it's nearly been an hour. We were on 38 minutes, I think it's been. So let's keep going. Right, let's try and get this done. We are going to take some of this. This is the Praxeti White. This is another Citadel. Make sure that's dry. Don't want to contaminate this. That was quite a lot. So I'm going to wipe a lot of that off. And this is going to be real light. This is going to be tops of those wings, down the edges. Maybe just blending it in from the side. I'm using a lot of the side of the brush. I'm going real gentle now because I just want the detail to come out now. Just on those top areas where the light would hit. maybe give the feathers just a little bit more than what they have with the browns. And this should really help them kind of like pop out. Plus also on the actual picture, which we were looking at earlier, we can see that there are differences in those colours that lead up to those greys and those whites. And yeah, we kind of want to add that to it to get it looking relatively simple within the hour. Add it just to the knees, and I'm going to add it to around the hands. Because again, I'm trying not to use a wash on this. Add it to the top of the head. And then the very tips of those tails. Tails? Tail feathers. I might go a bit further up on the centre one, but there we go. So, you can see the difference there from the distance, but hopefully, if I put this down over here, you should then see. I'll turn it on, you should see it better on the back. There you go, you can see that difference in shade coming through. So, next up on the agenda, I'm going to take another little bit of contrast paint at this point, and I'm going to add it to the beak. This way, hopefully it should give us some depth, and it should mean that we have a nice area, or a nice colour difference on that beak. And we're almost there. Speed paint, it's been 40 minutes, and we're nearly there on Monster 1. So, this one is iodine yellow. That's how you say that. And I'm just taking, that's a bit too much on my brush. A little bit of that, and we're just going to apply it to the top of that beak. Follow that line down into the bottom of the mouth. Right. I actually need to take some of that back. There's a bit too much near the base of the beak where it meets the face. Okay. The wrap on the spear is a slightly different brown, so we're going to go back to our dryad brown, this leather brown. It's somewhere between the oak brown that we used before and the XV88 we used on the rest of the staff. So I'm going to take some of that, I'm going to add it to where the hand wraps are. Hand wraps? Not hand wraps, the staff grip is wrapped around. And I thin this one down quite a bit, and I'm hoping that a little bit of that dry brushing that we did over the hands that went onto that spear grip, or the javelin grip, will show through in a minute. Right, so we have the majority of a table-ready mini. Very aware of the time. So, let's have a quick gander. I'm going to add a little bit of white to the XV88. I'm going to do just a highlighting line down the top of the shaft of the javelin, because we want, again, just where light's hitting it, just to add a little bit of detail. Just that little bit of layering up, which I could say that this is table ready as it is, which is the whole point of this speed paint, is to just be table ready. That's what we want from this show, is how fast you can paint up a mini, provided I unclog paints I haven't used for a while. So this one is the matte white from the Army Painter, which if you're in the GM starter set is also lawful white. Right, just going to thin this one down, and then I'm going to just get it up to that tan, that XV88, and I'm just pushing one into the other by the edges just to create a blend there. So we're wet blending them together to mix them in the palette, and then I'm going to take a little bit on that brush, take some of the excess off. I'm just going to apply that line to the top of that javelin where the light would be hitting. Right, I need some black because I need to get those claws done. So we need some of the Chaos Black, I think it's called. If I don't already have it out. I do, there it is. So, You can tell the paints I haven't used for a while. Where is my unblocky blocker? Losing everything now. Time's precious. I'm wasting it. Right. There is the black. And we only need a tiny amount. We're going to do the talons on the Aarakocra here. So, what's the layer? Where is my artificer layer? Actually, that one's thin enough. We can use that one. So, very, very small amount. I would normally, for anything this small or eyes, stick on my big old magnifying glasses, but I wanted this to be a show that could show you that with just some of the basic paints and the basic techniques, you can have a table-ready mini, well, hopefully within an hour. We'll see what we're at the hour point. But we're close. Very, very close. Any more talons? Let's have a look at the one on there. So we're just going to add it to the tips of those fingers. Perfect. Now I'm going to try and get a little dot in the eyes. Just so we have those pupils. Perfect. Right. We have one more job to do on this, and then I think I'm happy to say that that is done. So we are trying to blast through the speed paint on the Aarakocra, the first monster in the monster manual. So let's get a close-up of that one so far. So, like I said, this is just designed to be table ready. But so far, we've got the greens on there of the uniform that they're wearing, or the tabard, and the turquoise of the outsides. We use 2 yellows, and I don't think you're going to pick up the eyes in this, but we have added some yellow and black into the eyes as well. But I'll try and get some pictures of that for Instagram later on. Right, last but not least, one last thing I like to do, and this is with most minis, and this is what I think makes a difference for any tabletop ready paint job, is to add this technique. And it is my favorite technique, is to take some of this Templar black, Black Templar from Citadel, and it's to go around and basically draw in some really thick black lines underneath things like belts and underneath areas where you want the separation between parts of the body. So looking at this particular mini, I'm going to be grabbing definitely underneath the belt and underneath each bit of that tabard. So the tabard, as it comes down the front of the groin, has these triangles in these layers, and I'm going to try and just go beneath each one of those, very thin line. It's almost like a shade that you would get with doing a wash. You're only applying it to these very specific areas. And I'm a big fan of that. So I'm going to put it between the pauldron bits. And again, I would normally use my big magnifying glasses for this, but I'm trying to do this show with as little equipment as possible. I'm going to get between the neck and the armor. Then we're going to try and get around those hands, just to give it separation between the hands and the staff, at the head of the staff and at the base of the hand grip. We have the top of the leg wraps and the base of the leg wraps, but I'm also going to try and get between those talons because there is a real recess in there. So again, we're going to try and get in there, and I'm using a very, very minuscule amount of this Templar black. It is minute in the very tip of one of my finest brushes, because I really don't want it to be a wash. I want it to be a thin black line between areas. And this is probably the most detailed we'll go on this mini. Just trying to get underneath that first breastplate, just to add some shading in there. Then we've got around the back. Just underneath the belt there. And then I might just add some between some of those tail feathers, just to make that big one in the middle really stand out. How are we looking on the wings? I think I might add some to the layers of the wings as well. Just where you can see those like differences, where they kind of go up the model. And then I'm going to call it done. Good thing about the contrast, if you do make a mistake, you can just rub your finger over it while it's still wet and get it off those taller bits. And hopefully this will add some of that striped look to the wings that we can see in the monster manual on its picture. And that is, I would say, about as far as we're going to go. Just going to add a little bit to the beak just to separate it from the rest of the face. Right on the corner there, so the jawline. Just because I've got a little bit of time to go that little bit further. And we are still within the hour. Let's add it to this line just here. And that line just there on the tabard. And then the base of that neckline as well. And it really is just the tip of the brush. Awesome. I think that's us at 1 hour, 1 speed paint, first monster from the monster manual, done. So, I'm going to see if I can actually get a better angle on this for you, because for saying that was 50 minutes, I'm quite proud of that. Let's have a look. Where's my PTZ remote? Let's just move it around this way like that, because hopefully she gets some better light this way around. So, there we go. So we've got those greens on there. We've got the beak done, and that's like the top colour part. We've got that brown and white on the wings. We've got the spear pretty much done. I could add a silver highlight to the top edge of that. And we've got those wings looking at least some difference between the feathers, just to add that light to the top there. And in the grand scheme of things, compared to the actual one from the monster manual, I wonder if we can get that around there a bit more. So we have that one there, and that one there. I'll find a way of showing those off better later on, but I'll take some pictures for Instagram. So, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I'll get this up on YouTube pretty soon, and then we'll move on to the next monster in the monster manual, which is the Aboleth. So this will be another WizKids mini, and then we'll hopefully see you again soon. Until then, take it easy.